Our next speaker is Joselina Peralta. She's the founder and CEO at Stractix, and she also spoke at our Supply Chain Live event in Chicago in May. She described herself in a recent interview for Supply Chain Digital as one of those why kids, a problem solver by nature who spent 2 decades as a supply chain executive before launching her own consultancy. So she knows her stuff, and she says it's not a tech problem, it's a partnership problem, and procurement can fix it. Please put your hands together for Joselina.
So let's just check the mic. Great. So it is not a tech problem. It's a partnership problem, and procurement can fix it. We're going to go into this journey together, so I hope that at the end of the conversation, you guys are prepared also for some questions. For decades, we have spent billions on ERP upgrades, shiny new systems, AI pilots, and yet, we see the same results. Essentially, we see suppliers disengage, cost breaks, value stalls. Why? The problem isn't technology. The problem is partnerships. It's about trust. It's about clarity. It's about partnerships. So, I didn't fall into procurement or supply chain. I chose to master it. From buyer to chief procurement officer. From planner to chief supply chain officer. From chief operating officer to strategic partner. And along the way, I always led procurement as a growth engine and not a cost center. Today, I want to show you that why tech won't save us, but clarity and trust will. How many of you, by show of hands, have lived to at least one system upgrade? A lot, right? Now, how many of you felt that it solved all of your problems? Anybody? I see a chuckle here. So, exactly. We upgrade, we spend millions of dollars, and yet we're still chasing the same outcomes. Because the real problem is in technology. It's much, much deeper. The real bottleneck is in the software. It's the operating model wrapped around it. If your processes are misaligned, if your governance breaks, if your functions don't trust each other, no system can save you. In fact, tech accelerates dysfunction as fast as it accelerates progress. Think about that. So you don't have a technology problem. You have a clarity problem and a trust gap. Executives don't trust the data. Functions don't trust procurement. And teams don't trust that the clarity in the priorities have been set. So when trust breaks down, every new tool just becomes a dashboard of confusion. Let me take you back to one of the toughest moments in my career. I was in an oil and gas industry. It was a repack and distribution project, highly political, toxic. Nobody wanted it because the executive who architected the deal later on became the CEO. So to challenge it meant getting right in the middle of the line of fire. And I volunteer. So instead of fighting with the vendor as a mortal enemy, we reframe the relationship, and we rebuild trust. We turn them from exit legacy partner into a growth collaborator. In fact, we launched 2 distribution channels, one in EMEA and the other one in the Scandinavian countries. And together we open a new market that it didn't exist for the business. The result, 40 million year-on-year unlocked. But more importantly, we earn the trust of the CEO and the board. We shift the procurement story from a cost cutter to a growth engine. And that's when I realized it's never just about the contract. It's about the courage to shift the story from transactional to transformational. That experience taught me something. Companies don't fail because of bad systems. They fail because they build tech stacks without trust stacks. Without trust, no system can ever deliver outcomes. When you stack clarity, trust, and partnerships on top of your tech, that's when you shift procurement for back office to the boardroom. My colleagues and friends, the future of business won't be built by technology alone. It will be built by leaders who architects trust, by procurement and supply chain leaders who show up not as cost cutters, but as growth co-creators. And this isn't a tech problem. It is a partnership problem. And procurement, done right, is the function that it can fix it. But because when trust is architected, growth compounds. And that's the future that I'm here to build with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joselina. Does anyone have any questions? I have a question. I wanted to ask you if you could give the audience one piece of advice to strengthen their supply chain partnership of all the things that you've mentioned, what would it be?
One advice only?
Yeah.
I think you have to listen more and engage more. So procurement touches every aspect of the company, every deal. I am of the opinion that the chief procurement officer should stand for the chief partnership officer. So you not only translate externally the internal needs, but also you connect the outside world with the in world, right? So we are the deal makers, but it's time to own it. It's time to actually embody the fact that we can shape the board's agenda. The problem is we talk too much in functional jargon, and I was having that conversation before I hop into the stage when somebody was saying, well, what about if you're talking about a metric like, for example, perfect order, or you're talking about on time in full? A CEO, it's not going to care necessarily that your on time in full is 99.5. Now, if you tell them your time to shelf is going to be actually changing from 4 days to 2 days, now you're getting their attention. They're actually then now are going to understand that into board stakes, what it matters. So I think it's 2 things instead of 1. I'm sorry, Claire. Bless you. It's about really engaging more because you do have a lot of your fingers and a lot of the company end to end. And also to change from what does it mean for the business at the board stake level.
Okay, and we've talked an awful lot today about new technology. How do you see technology enabling better partnerships?
It does. The point of the matter of my keynote here is that technology is going to amplify what already exists. So if what exists is dysfunction, so if you don't have clarity, trust, and alignment, the system is not going to do that for you. But if you do have the right fundamentals, yeah, the system is actually going to be an accelerator. But there's no system that is going to do that magically. I just had a client this past week who said to me, hey, Joselina, can you just come and build me a quick and dirty roadmap strategy for the next 5 years for my systems, because they have Oracle and they wanted to change from their planning system to EBS. So they wanted to go with a different solution. And I said, oof, can I do that, the quick and dirty? Sure, I can do that. But is that going to help you? The minute that we go and build the business case and you're going to ask the board for money, within less than 2 weeks, you're going to need to be asking for more. So, and I said to them, that's not going to serve you. It's not going to serve me. I know a lot of consultants. Any consultants in the room? Okay, don't kill me later, but most the consultants, I come from a world where I used to be my client. So I'm a practice-led former executive, as I was sharing at the beginning. So the traditional model believes that, you go in, you put Band-Aids, and you fix systemic things, and you come back again and again and again with the same deck, maybe different logo, and it's the same, one-trick pony story show. I believe if I have to come more than once for the same problem, then I didn't do it right the first time. So I am of a different opinion about how this model should work. And I also believe that you have to really structure this in a way that you build a sponsorship with the C-suite. So the credibility of the executive, whether if it's the procurement or the supply chain leader, they can actually, it's not about the consultant, it's about getting that team to actually earn the trust and the credibility of the board and get their problem fixed. So in that story with the roadmap, the quick and dirty one, in the end, we ended up doing it right. I said, first you have to take stock of whatever systems you have. And I said, it's not about you working in isolation. We need to work with IT as well. And sometimes the CIOs and the CPOs, they are not necessarily in the same, joint forces. And that's actually a mistake. You have to join forces, and you also have to be able to understand what do you have. Because some systems, they need upgrades. Some systems, they need to actually be phased out. Some systems, they actually don't have been activated in full, and the user population haven't necessarily learned how to use it. So it's not just about, let's just upgrade immediately. You have to be able to educate yourself, get the most value from that investment, and make sure that you build the user population and the critical mass. So it's about the system, it's not the strategy. The strategy is the business, and the system is going to be as a function of what your strategy is, not the other way around.
And when disruption hits, we've talked a lot about disruption already today, how do you keep those partnerships resilient then?
So, how many of you are married in the room? A lot of people, right? So you know when there is a challenge with your loved one, right? That it's not like, see ya, I'm out, right? So you really have to work, and you need to get in there. That's the moment. That's really the moment where the relationship is going to be tested. Why would it be any different with your suppliers, with your collaborators, with your business partners? It's not. So it's about really opening the table for a trust and clarity conversation, where there is going to be things that maybe you're not agreeing with. There's going to be things that they are not in agreement with. But as long as you speak them truth to power, clearly, and you align with what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, that doesn't mean that you have to have consensus, by the way. You can always agree to disagree on things, as long as you create the space for that conversation to emerge. So to me, the resilience aspects, it's become a part of the evolution of the maturity of the relationship. You start first dating, you were feeling each other out. Then you actually learn your values. And then you decided to also figure it out, what was your walkaway points and the things where you tested your limits. It's no different in a commercial relationship with a business. And once you actually establish those boundaries, and where do you want to go, and what's your growth and vision, and how do you then interlock your P&Ls, it becomes a very different conversation. If you're not growing, if you're not co-investing, if you're not actually helping each other to win more in the market, you're not partners. I will say one more thing. I believe SRM should be killed completely. Rest in peace. Good riddance. Ciao. Because the minute that you actually are controlling somebody, who likes to be controlled? No hands, right? Nobody, right? The minute that I'm controlling you, you're not creating with me. The minute that I'm controlling something, I'm limiting the possibilities of what that actually will be as an outcome. So that's why I believe that it should never be a supplier relationship management, because you manage processes, you manage transactions, you cannot manage a relationship. I bet you none of you manage your wife or your spouse, right? Shouldn't be the same thing. You cannot manage a supplier relationship.
Thank you very much. It's your last chance. Does anyone have any questions for Joselina? Thank you very much. If you'd just like to, when you get the mic, introduce yourself.
Hi, Akbar Alinani from Biotech, a company by the name of Regeneron. So this is the first time I've heard you say, or any consultant say, kill SRM. Interesting concept. I don't think I have personally seen anything that truly could be called a partnership. Because unless you have both parties with equal stakes in the ground, it doesn't really work. I think we also need technology because that enables and makes us efficient. However, it's challenging to see what the good looks like. And you've been around, you've seen a lot. So maybe perhaps in your wisdom, you can share some examples of best practices that you've seen that perhaps we could think about, because truly taking it from where it's a tactical and operational relationship to strategic, equally compatible, where interests of both parties in co-development, co-innovation, even revenue sharing is really what comes to mind. I haven't seen one that has really worked, but perhaps if you can educate us or show us some best practices that you think would be worth looking into. But I agree the relationships should be important element of what we all do. Unfortunately, we're all governed by metrics and data, and with the constrained environment of resources that all of us face, it's hard to have that time invested to truly build a good, sustainable long-term partnership.
No, thank you for that question. I'll share a couple of practical examples on how that actually works. So oftentimes, companies, they do their product development process in isolation. So you have your MPIs, your MPCs, and so on, right? So one of the things that we did, and this was actually in a biotech company. So instead of, the moment that you do that, and you work with, if it's with R&D internally, and you also work with your commercial teams internally, and let's say you fall in love with the molecule, and you start formulating something. This particular example was the case. The minute that you do that in isolation without your partner suppliers, you are designing a bottleneck. Because the minute that you say, oh, I want this formula with this recipe, with these ingredients, with this in this market, with this type of packaging, and so on and so forth, if the primary formula that you are testing and designing without really understanding the availability, the market, and so on, you might actually be constrained maybe by a shorter pool of potential companies that can deliver. Maybe they don't even understand the incentive. Where are you going? Does it make sense for them to scale and do more, et cetera, especially if you don't share that information. So one of the things that we did is that we actually created a think tank with companies that produces some of the molecules that we were actually looking to be for the next backbone of our chemistry, and for where do we actually need it to be for the next 5 years, because of differentiation, because of adding more value to our end clients, and et cetera. And we brought companies in, and we told them not what we wanted as for the molecule, but we told them the end point, to work it backwards and say, okay, how do we design this product together? It's very different, right? That when I go into a regular request and say, here, and I will quote, molecule A, B, and C, and then find people, sources to supply, that I'm going to design this with potentially you and you and you and you. Are you game? Are you in it? This is the budget, et cetera, et cetera. So we did. We designed it with 2 companies. one for the European market and the other one for the Americas. Because capacity-wise, they had committed for those markets, and also regulatory issues, et cetera, so that's why we couldn't commit to just one company. The moral of the story is that we went from, instead of having QBRs, we actually had joint P&L meetings. We also share resources, talking talent. So we built a complete business enterprise where it was an operating model. It doesn't matter which company, but we have defined targets and gain share, including gain share incentives with bonuses at the end of the year. That's one example. The other example, it was in the pharmaceutical industry. We actually did what we call two-in-a-box model with them. So essentially, there was a gap with talent, meaning the technological licensing and processes, we had a shortage of talent within our own company. Within the other company, we actually worked a labor deal where we were able to share resources as long as they were trained for the sake of the project. And this was a project where not only we joined, like I said, financials, but we also joined in when it came down to talent sharing and development. Unheard of. Because, I mean, we were not just being partners from the product, partners from the outcome, but also partners from talent development as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you come in with a creative mind, openness, and of course you have to create the framework so then it's repeatable and scalable. And both companies put what their needs, what their wants, what their objectives, and align with values, it is possible to create it. And I'm happy to discuss offline too on more examples if you're interested, or anybody's interested for that matter.
Thank you, Joselina.